Dr. Jazz.
You know,
Dr.
first of all, thanks for sending the new album, which it was on repeat like the last week. And my daughter, she's 11 months,
Oh, thanks, man.
11 months, and she was like grooving all the time. She's so dancey. Like we were like driving my family insane. But I love it, man. It's such a good album. And
Thank
like,
you.
what's the story behind it? I mean, first of all, I wanted to ask you about the compositions. You know, there are some beautiful tunes like that Puerto Madero and the Haunted Ballroom, and I love that slightly comical touch, at least for me, on COVID vaccination. But like,
Yeah.
how did you compose the album? And in general, I mean, what's your story when composing?
That's a tough question, man, because often I don't even remember how things happened, because they happen so slowly. I'm not a very fast worker. So things happen and they unfold over weeks and weeks of time. So as a tune grows every day, I'm not really even aware when a month later, when someone asks me, well, how did you compose that? I don't even remember, because so much was just a daily contribution to the tune. And it might be in some instances, it's just trial and error and process of elimination, throwing away all the stuff you hate before you can finally get to something that you like.
Yeah.
But I have to say that one thing that was a positive element of the whole COVID lockdown, where I wasn't touring at all, is I was sitting around and just trying to get better at playing solo guitar. I never really, I don't see myself as a person that's ever going to do a solo guitar tour, or even really, I'm not really interested even in playing solo guitar that much. But I just felt like I needed to have more instant access to the harmony that's in my head, so that I could write more in real time, instead of just, try this chord, no, try this chord, no, try this chord, no, try this chord, no. So finally, I feel like during the whole year that I practiced this solo guitar thing, I got better at hearing and just being able to get to the sounds that I hear in my head. And I probably worked on that more than anything else. So a lot of the passages and sections of the new album were written more in real time than in stop time, where you make a decision about every single chord. I was just able to sit there, record myself playing, and quite a lot of the stuff that I just played and improvised, I ended up using in the songs. So in a way, they were composed in a more organic way than on my previous records. So I'm kind of proud of that, because I needed to practice that. It was something I was never very good at. I'm still not great. I'm no Keith Jarrett, that's for sure. But I'm working on it.
No, it's beautiful. Yeah, the harmonic movement on some tunes, man. It's like it's so beautiful. It's
Thank you.
Amazing. Yeah. I mean, you always want to listen. I mean, obviously, I have all of your records and the tribal tech stuff, and always your compositions. Like, I remember when I think it was on Face First on Reality Check, the Stella in infrared.
Yeah.
I'm still teaching that, like da 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 da. I was like,
Yeah.
this is killing stuff, and I always loved your
Thanks,
compositions.
man.
So beautiful.
Writing is for me, it doesn't take talent as much as it takes hard work. I never really considered myself to be all that talented, but I will sit there and work my ass off until something comes out that I like. And I believe that everyone has that ability, and a lot of people give up too easily. If they don't come up with something the first day, they just go, I can't do this. And it's just not true. If you work really hard, and if you just keep sort of, it's to me, it's like sculpting. You make a little mistake, you don't just throw the whole sculpture away and get a new block of concrete and start all over again. You know, you keep chiseling away and fixing mistakes and building, and every single day is a new fix of a little part that you maybe didn't like. You keep the parts you do like, you fix the parts you don't, and it's a work in progress, and that work can go on for weeks or even months. And if you're willing to do the work, anybody can write good stuff. But some people are just, I think, expecting too much instant gratification.
Yeah.
And if there's one thing I've learned, it's just to be patient with myself and just keep working until something good happens, because I know that it eventually will. And of course, we all get frustrated when it doesn't happen on the day you wanted it to.
Yeah. Oh man. Yeah.
Keep on plugging away, and sooner or later, good things happen. You know, so I can't really take any credit for being some kind of talented composer. I just work really hard.
Interesting to hear that from you. Yeah, okay. Good to hear that from you, actually. So then I'm always when I'll compose, I'll be like, okay, shit, it's good.
I've just seen it happen to some of my students. You know, some of my students come to me with their compositions, and I go, well, maybe, you know, you got some good ideas there, but if you improve this part, and then they go away, they come back a couple weeks later, and I see that they really have, and it's starting to form a really good song, and I see the work that went into making that happen.
Yeah.
And I go, well, hey, if my students can do it, then anybody can do it. You know, it's just takes somebody telling you to don't give up so easy.
Yeah. When did you start composing, actually? I mean, obviously I know, you know, Spears came out like mid 80s, but like you played like
15, I was already composed.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah. Wow. Because I mean, my biggest influence, and still is probably Led Zeppelin. And they've always been my favorite rock band. And you know, what attracted me to them was not just the great playing and the great music, but I mean the songs, the compositions.
Yeah.
They were so ahead of their time.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just teaching yesterday one student of mine, The Ocean.
Yeah.
Get it done.
You know, it's such great music. Such great music.
Yeah. Beautiful.
You know, and not only was Jimmy Page a big influence on me as a songwriter and as a great studio musician, but also as someone who added to the music by adding extra guitar parts and layering and doing all this kind of stuff, which many of us, you know, I can think of all the guitar players who do that.
Sure.
I think we sort of owe that to Jimmy Page, because he was one of the first guys that did it. Maybe Les Paul was also a big, you know, innovator, because he was layering guitars maybe before anyone else. But Jimmy Page, I don't know for a fact that Jimmy Page was influenced by Les Paul, but for sure Les Paul was one of the first guys to do it.
Yeah.
And Jimmy Page is one of the first guys in that era of rock bands to do it. But I actually found that Ritchie Blackmore was also layering quite a bit.
Definitely. Yeah.
You don't hear it as much because sometimes the keyboards cover it up. But I went on a website where you could download a lot of Ritchie Blackmore's guitar parts without the band.
Really? Oh,
and there's like 5 or 6 guitar tracks on every song. You know, so he was doing stuff like when there was a bass line, or when the guitar was doubling the bass or playing some kind of figure, he would record a really mid-rangey guitar thing on the left, and then record a really scooped out, you know, double of that part with lots of bass and treble on the right. And when you put those parts together in stereo, it sounds huge, sounds massive. So, and a lot of people listen to the record and they think, well, that's just one track of guitar, but it's not. Gotcha. It's actually 2. But because there's keyboards in there, it's not so, it doesn't stick out quite as much as like on a Led Zeppelin record where there's no keyboards and you can hear it more clearly.
Yeah.
But Ritchie Blackmore was also layering on just about every single Deep Purple song.
Yeah. And Jeff Beck did it. I mean, actually, also later, I think, or even
Jeff
earlier.
Beck also,
Yeah,
yeah, definitely,
he's one of those
especially
guys.
on records like Blow by Blow
Oh,
and Fired. Lots of guitar parts layered on top of each other.
those two are my favorites. Blow by Blow,
Cool
man. That's
stuff.
like, oh,
Oh yeah, that's such a great album. Really cool stuff.
yeah. Yeah. Did you transcribe those guys or like just like write down licks when you listen to
I didn't really, but I totally was influenced by it. I mean, probably all those guys influenced me to some point. Jeff Beck and Richie Blackmore, Jimmy Page, um, Carlos Santana. I was listening to Abraxas
Mm.
and what is the Blue album with the Sunrise? That's a really good album. He plays a really good solo on Song of the Wind on that Caravanserai, I think.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Great, some great guitar playing on that. Yeah, I mean, I just almost every guitar player from that era influenced me in some way.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
How did you stumble then from these rock guys to jazz, or who was there like a certain moment that you were like, shit, I want to do
Yeah,
that?
I think the main moment was when I was hired by an all black group, and I was with them for about 4 years,
Wow.
maybe 5 years, and I was the only white kid in the band, and I was completely clueless about black music. I knew nothing about it because I was raised up with white rock, right? I didn't even know about B.B. King and Albert King and Albert Collins and Muddy Waters and all the people who influenced the white bands from England that I was listening to. I was that clueless. Later, I found out that Led Zeppelin wouldn't exist without Muddy Waters and without all those black musicians who basically invented the blues, so and probably people before them. So anyway, I sort of went backwards and learned about them. And when I joined the all black group, we were doing all Motown music and music by James Brown, Kool and the Gang, Tower of Power, some just everything, funk, any kind of funk, and R&B. And we backed up a lot of famous R&B singers because we had a house gig, and a lot of famous Motown singers came through, and we were their backup band. So from that, I kind of learned that I could love both kinds of music, that I had equal love for rock and R&B and funk, and because of the influence of R&B and funk, some of that music had more jazz elements in it than rock did, especially bands like Tower of Power, where saxophone players were playing kind of jazzy solos, and that kind of got me into fusion. I started listening to Weather Report and bands that were sort of at that time, I guess they were experimental. They came from the jazz world, but they had a lot of rock and funk elements in them. So it was easier for me to listen to than straight ahead jazz, which I knew nothing about. But it was just sort of like the same in the blues world, where I had to go chronologically back in time to realize that in order for me to enjoy bands like Weather Report and really understand what they were doing, I had to go back and listen to Charlie Parker and John Coltrane, because much of the vocabulary that they were using came from those artists back in the past, back in the 40s. Sure. So I started listening to straight ahead jazz. And, as years go by, you just have so many influences from all these different types, styles of music, that they become part of what you do. I might be one of the only musicians that you've interviewed that can actually say, I don't have a favorite kind of music. I just like good music. And it doesn't really matter to me what kind of music it is. If it's good, I'm going to like it. And I'm not judgmental. I don't, there's not one kind of music that probably doesn't have good things to offer.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
In my viewpoint.
Yeah. I mean, you have really bad jazz and bad fusion as well, like bad classical music, anything, like, so sure. Yeah. No, but it's funny. You mentioned all these, influences. Now it's gelled, like I think already quite early into who you are, because I listened to the older stuff and it's like, yeah, that's Scott playing. It's you immediately formed your sound and style, actually. I mean, that's quite fast.
Yeah, and I guess
Happened to
it's
me.
just how many different influences you have in your playing, because everybody's influenced by other
Yeah,
musicians, whether you want
definitely.
to admit it or not. Like it all, I always think it's funny when, people say, "Oh, he's such an innovator." Well, yeah, he might be an innovator, but I mean, for example, Stevie Ray Vaughan.
Yeah.
Stevie Ray Vaughan
Oh,
is an innovator. He came up with a voice that's all his own,
yeah.
but you clearly hear the influence of Albert King and Jimi Hendrix in his playing. That doesn't mean that Stevie wasn't an innovator, but you can clearly hear his influences. Same thing as Michael Brecker.
Sure.
He was very influenced by Coltrane, and you can hear many of Coltrane's, you know, lines
Licks.
and
Yeah, yeah,
vocabulary and Michael
yeah,
Brecker's playing, but he added to it from so many other influences, and it's Michael Brecker.
yeah,
But you can hear the influence of Lenny Breau on people like Philip Degree, or
yeah.
the influence of Chad Atkins on Philip Degree. You can hear or
It's a
the
whole
the
lineage.
influence
Yeah,
of Lenny Breau on so many jazz guitar players, because he was such a uh, influential guy for sure.
yeah, yeah. Oh, uh, so how do you mentioned before Weather Report, and how did that gig with Joe happen, and what did it mean to you? Like, do you remember the first gig actually with Joe? And
Yeah, I mean, it was a little intimidating. I mean, Joe had been used to listening to Wayne Shorter every night. And I was like, oh man, how can he listen to me after he's been listening to Wayne Shorter? So I have to admit, I was a little nervous and intimidated. I think anybody would be,
yeah,
but I just did my best. I tried to change my style uh, from being a lick oriented guitar player
mm,
to be more of a melodic guitar player, because I knew that Joe didn't like licks. He wasn't into licks. And when I anytime I would play a lick which he could clearly hear came from the bebop jazz vocabulary, he didn't like it, and he wasn't he did not have any problems with telling me he didn't like it.
sure.
So he was just saying, "Don't play that bebop shit in my band. This isn't a bebop band. You know, if you're going to play something, improvise it. Don't quote other people and play licks." And I can't tell you how much that hurt me as a guitarist, because that's all I was about, was licks at that part of my career. I really hadn't learned to improvise. All I was doing basically is quoting other musicians.
Mm,
And I wish I had an opportunity to play with Joe now, because now I'm much more of an improviser than I was back then. I was just a lick player back then.
mm.
And I just wish I had an opportunity to do it again, because now I think I could play more stuff that he would like. But you
Yeah,
know,
yeah, sure. But come on, those records that are fantastic that you played, like, so many
well,
bootlegs and videos of you
I
guys.
remember playing a solo. We recorded Little Rudy Tootie,
Yeah,
and he which was a monk tune,
yeah,
and he was cool. He said, "You're going to play a solo on this tune, so just hang in here. I'll give you a couple hours, play a solo on this tune." So I did. I punched in, and I played what I thought was a really good solo on that tune. I made all the changes. It's a rhythm changes tune with a couple little quirks here and there. And I thought I played a really good solo. And Joe came in and he just said, "Erase that shit."
oh
He
shit.
said, if I wanted Charlie Christian on my album, I would have dug him up and hired him.
Oh man.
And I said, okay. So he just said, play a solo and just just improvise. And I played a first take, and that's what ended up on the record. I don't really remember making the changes, or I remember sort of trying to make it not sound like bebop, but more blues.
Yeah.
That's what he wanted. He wanted a more modern approach. He did not want me to play and emulate the bebop players that would have played that song in the 50s, right?
Yeah,
or whenever it was recorded. That was Joe, you know. He just I think he probably played enough bebop in his career after all those years with Cannonball.
Cannonball, yeah, sure.
I don't think he wanted to hear that music anymore. And I think it was really, it must have been a very brave, incredibly brave move to just say, I'm going to start this band with Wayne Shorter, and we are going to go a completely different direction than everything I've done in the past, which was basically bop.
Yeah.
And I'm going to just go in a completely melodic and creative direction that was new. And I think it took a lot of guts to do that. It was a really brave move because it wasn't accepted among a lot of the jazz critics. And it grew into something great, but at first wasn't very accepted.
Yeah.
It was just like when John Coltrane did A Love Supreme, people were like, how come you're not playing Stella by Starlight?
Exactly.
Or when Miles Davis did Bitches Brew, you know, people didn't want to hear it because it was not all of me, right? So musicians take chances and they do things that are extreme, and then much later they get credit.
That's always true, yeah. How was Joe like towards you young guys on the tours and stuff? I mean, you know, he was a seasoned veteran.
He was mean, but in a funny way. You know, that's was a cool thing about Joe, is he was mean as hell, but in such a comical way that you could never be mad at him.
Sure.
So everything he said was funny. Almost Joe could have definitely had another career as a comedian. So even if he said something to you that wasn't very nice, he always said it in a way that made you laugh. And you know, I mean, like most band leaders, that, you know, they want what they want. I'd have to say the same thing of myself, but I don't really have to tell my guys what to do. They just know what to do.
Yeah.
They just do it naturally. I don't really have to talk to them a lot and say, hey, don't do this or don't do that. They just kind of naturally know how to play. And some of the people in our band with Joe didn't. You know, some guys played too much, overplayed. Just, I don't know. I look back at my tone back then, wasn't that great. But you know, Joe saw me about 5 years after I had left the band, and he just went up to me and he just said, you are the greatest ensemble player I've ever played with.
Wow, man.
And you know what? I know why he said that, because I know he didn't come up and say you were one of the greatest improvisers I've ever played with, because that would have been a complete bullshit statement. But ensemble wise, I was good for that band. Like, I really helped him arrange the music and helped him with sounds and with ideas. And I was kind of like, I kind of took over Jocko's role, because what I heard, that's what Jocko did a lot in Weather Report, was help arrange the music. Not Wayne's music, because Wayne did that, but Joe's music. Joe tends to just like to jam. And if Joe had his way, every song would be 20 minutes long.
Yeah.
So Jocko would say, okay, it's time to move on. It's time to go here. It's time to go there. What if we do this? What if we only make this long? So he was sort of like looking after the audience viewpoint of the music. And I kind of took over that job, and I was kind of the arranger on stage, because Joe, if you left it up to Joe, those tunes would go on forever.
Yeah.
He appreciated that. You know, even he would even say, if you think it's time to move on, give the signal to move on. And if I get pissed off, don't pay attention to me, because I like to jam, and I'm not going to like it when you signal the next section and cut me off, but do it anyway, because I know that we can't just play 2 songs a set.
Oh shit! Yeah, that's a heavy responsibility.
Aware.
That's a heavy responsibility.
He was aware of how things could get out of control if it was left up to him.
Yeah.
You know, so you know, I appreciated that compliment that he gave me.
Wow, yeah, that's amazing. Yeah. Like, was Chick the complete opposite as a band
Yeah,
leader?
because
Yeah,
it
right.
was completely, yeah. I mean, everything was
Structured.
totally preconceived, and you know, he didn't need any help. Everything was always already arranged.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, because it's also music-wise. Yeah, it's a way more open, of course. Joe's
Yeah.
Chick's. Yeah.
I'm trying to sort of be with my band somewhere in the middle, you know, to have composed sections, but have some freedom where the songs can be different every night. And I believe a good concert is a mixture between the two
Yeah.
elements of composition and improvisation. If you're playing compositions that you're going to play the same way every night, it's going to turn into like that top 40 band mentality, and people are going to get bored, and it's going to be boring for the audience too. So it's a tough line to it's a, you know, it's just the, what do you call it, a in the circus when you're tightrope.
Yeah.
You know,
walking on a tightrope. Yeah, sure.
yeah, it's like walking on a tightrope. You know, the worst thing that can happen is when you're playing a tune and you're noticing that this is the same every night. It's getting boring to play. How can we fix this so it's more open and it's more fun every night for us?
How do we do that?
Yeah, well, a lot of times you just have to get rid of sections that you don't need and turn it into more of an open kind of thing where different things can happen every night, where there can be more conversation between the band members. Because if you lock them into playing parts, there can be conversation.
Yeah.
So music has to remain conversational at all costs. So just trying to maintain that balance is tough sometimes, but that's what we try to do.
How do you keep? I mean, like, I had like last year my longest tour, which was 17 gigs in 17 days, right? And
Yeah.
I mean, that was a lot, you know. But like after gig 10, the music was beautiful. The audiences loved it. But like after gig 10, I had a problem that I fell into this black zone of feeling that I'm repeating myself, and I'm constantly playing the same
I have the
stuff.
same
Like,
problem.
how do you solve that and stay
I
fresh?
think we all have that.
Hmm.
Well, there's not really a solution for that problem, because
Yeah,
you are
okay.
you, and you have your vocabulary, and you can't just be someone else the next night. You don't get to just snap your fingers and be somebody else.
Yeah.
So there is a certain, you know, amount of repetition that you have to get used to because you're you. But I try to, if I have some time in the day, I try to figure out different approaches to a song that I might try that night that might be something different.
Yeah.
And my whole mindset becomes try to surprise the band with something that they haven't heard before. So figure out a new voicing, figure out a new rhythm, figure out, you know, or just figure out ways that I could maybe, you know, sometimes especially when you're playing trio, it's not like you can just change the voicings. I mean, sometimes the voicings have to stay what they are, but rhythmically there's a lot you can do.
Yeah.
You could play those voicing with a different rhythm every night, or play them softer or louder, or maybe with a different sound. So there's a lot you can do rhythmically to change things, you know, where if you're stuck playing the same voicings every night because you need those voicings to play the melody and the song. But even that can change if you have a little time in the day and say, let's try a new voicing here. Let's try even maybe a completely different harmony, different chord that might substitute for a voicing that I was playing before. Anything to just sort of entertain the other guys and sort of get their attention.
Yeah, that's
smart. So that they don't hear me playing the exact same thing every night. Of course, you know, during those times where you don't have the time to do that, you just got to realize that, you know, if you wrote it, own it. You know, it might have to be played the same way every night, and that's just part of the night that isn't going to change.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like I say, if you can contrast that by having some sections that are open, where kind of anything could happen, then you're not really relying on yourself to do something different. It's more of the responsibility of the whole group to do something different. So a lot of times I've found that by not concentrating too much on yourself and not being so me, and what I'm doing, but to concentrate on what the other guys are doing and play off them, you have a better chance of playing something different every night. And it's kind of goes hand in hand with something Bill Frisell just said in an interview in Guitar Player. The first rule of playing guitar is to listen. And many of us just don't listen. We only listen to ourselves. We don't listen to what's going on around us. Actually, if you listen to what's going on around you, it makes playing easier and more fun.
Yeah.
The more self-conscious you are, usually the worse you play anyway. So when you listen to what's going on around you, it gives you more ideas. You become more creative. Just you play with more space.
Yeah.
Just all these good things happen because you're listening. And I'd have to, hats off to Bill, because he knows, he's an experienced cat and he's a very creative guitar player, and he offers some really good suggestions in those. If you ever get a chance to check it out, it's an interview with a guitar player. It's like 10 things that guitar players can do to
try to find it.
improve their playing.
He's one of my heroes. I remember when I've seen him live so many times, but he's the band leader. There's like 12 tunes and he plays a solo 2 times maybe. He's like, Scottie Pippen of the Bulls or something like that.
Great, man.
He's a team player, amazing.
He's a really great musician in the fact that he's a team player, and he's very creative, and he's not a show off.
Yeah.
He just wants to be creative. And the stuff that he plays is so creative, and it's so in context of what's going on around him. And that's why I love his playing so much. It's not like he's just, you hear a lot of guitar players just play their shit and it's just a bunch of fast licks and the band's not really involved. And you feel like that you could get any other band members up there and that guitar player would just do the same thing over and over and over. Bill Frisell plays because of what's going on around him. Very influenced by what's going on around him, and you can hear it in his playing. He's super creative and he's listening.
Yeah, that's so important.
Really, really great musician.
Yeah. Oh, you had that with Tribal Tech so much, right?
Sometimes on a good night, we had our bad nights. I think the main thing that bugged me about Tribal Tech is we were way too loud. And
I saw you 3 times. It was loud, yeah.
so many what could have been musical events were spoiled because we played too loud. Because usually the most creative stuff happens when you're playing softer and when you can really hear each other and when you're really listening. And when you play that loud, sometimes all you get is room ambience because the volume just makes everything sound like a blur and you can't really hear what's going on with the individual players, and you miss opportunities to communicate because it's so goddamn loud.
Yeah.
So I think that was Tribal Tech's biggest folly is playing too loud. We just and I blame that basically on Kirk and Willis, not me and Kinsey, but Kirk and Willis. Loudest rhythm section I've ever played with to this day.
I mean, Kirk was really loud, yeah.
Incredibly unmusical, incredibly unmusical, and it's just it's too bad because they're both really good players, but it's just they didn't know how to play to a room. They would play the same, especially Kirk. Kirk would play the same way in an amphitheater that he would in a little tiny 50-seat club, just hit the drums as hard as he can. And it was sad because we could have been a better band, if it wasn't for that.
But on records, you really nailed the ballads always, and like the
records were different. Records were different because you're in a controlled atmosphere, and you're a controlled situation where you have a chance to set up so that you can really hear each other. So we were much better on records than we were live. I have to say that.
Interesting. How was it like your touring experience with Tribal Tech? Because you guys played a lot, right? I mean, like
Yeah, it wasn't as musical as like what I'm doing now with my
no, yeah,
trio.
yeah.
Wasn't as musical. With my trio, we play half the volume that Tribal Tech played.
Really? Wow.
So yeah. We don't play that loud. And I mean it's loud, but it's not ridiculous. It's not, we have a lot of softs. So there are a lot of loud moments, but they're balanced by quite a few soft moments as well and medium
Yeah,
moments.
that's important.
We're a
Yeah.
very dynamic band. Tribal Tech was never a very dynamic band.
Interesting.
And that was a failure, you know. And that's the only really, if I have to look back and say, I can't really think of anything else that was a big problem. That was the problem, that we just played too loud.
Interesting. Yeah, no, because for me it's like, or everyone, I think you really reinvented or relived fusion again, and like in the early 90s, those record reality check and face first. I think that
We had
was
our good
really
moments.
important.
Yeah, I mean, we had our good moments with the writing and
yeah, the writing is
good
incredible.
musicians and everything. And yeah, it's just that I just feel bad that the live gigs never really were as together as the records. Yeah, because like I said, just tremendous sound pressure. And I don't play well under those circumstances. I don't know how many other guitar players feel this way, but I sort of feel like when you reach a certain volume level, your guitar feels like it's getting out of control.
Yeah.
You can't control it. You get feedback, and not the good kind of feedback, but the bad kind of feedback. And every note wants to feed back, and it's hard to play legato because every note is trying to just go out of control. And I feel like I lose control of my tone when the volume is too loud. And there's a sort of a comfortable place where I get my best tone. It's still good volume. It's nice ballsy volume, but it's not ridiculous. It doesn't hurt your ears.
Yeah.
I know. I'm lucky because I have a master volume amp, so I don't have to crank a Marshall on 10 in a small club to get my tone. I can get a pretty gainy tone at just about any volume. That helps.
I wanted to ask you, your trio, and like, how did you decide to do? I mean, it's a long time ago, but Dog Party, that one, because it's like in the midst of you still kind of having Tribal Tech stuff, and
I think Tribal Tech. In the studio, we were doing a lot of really technical things, like digital recording hadn't come yet. There wasn't Pro Tools, so we were trying to have multi-keyboard parts layered when we only had 24 tracks, but yet we needed like 60 tracks to get all the keyboards. It was a very keyboard-oriented band. So we were using one track of the tape for SMPTE, running the computer off the SMPTE track, and having keyboards actually playing during the mix.
Oh, okay.
So that can get really complicated. And it got to the point where I was like, God, it's almost not about the music anymore. It's just so technical. And so I thought it would be fun just to put a band together and just go in the studio and roll the tape and play like we used to in the old days. And that's kind of how the Dog Party album came about.
Interesting. Yeah. But still, like when I listen to the last one, it's still quite intricate. But of course, not so many layers. But
there's a lot of layers, but I just try to make it as organic as possible. I guess I don't know. It's hard to split the difference sometimes between a guitar player and being a producer. I mean, part of me is a jazz guitar player that just loves improvising, and that's all I want to do is just play my guitar and improvise. But then I sort of feel like, one of the things that makes me not a jazz guitar player is I don't play standards, and I'm not a guy who just goes around and plays standards and reharmonize standards. I'm more about original music. Sure. And the idea of saying, well, this is my album, but it's really no different than my live gig. The only reason it's an album is because somebody was there with a microphone. I want to make my records more special than just another gig.
Yeah.
Right. I mean,
Yeah.
I do have a live album, and I'll probably make another live album, but that's all it is. It's just, there's no layers. It's just what we sound like when we go play a gig. But since I don't really get the opportunity to make that many records, I kind of want to make them special, and I want to work harder on them and produce them and add parts that I couldn't part. One of the things I love to do is take the main guitar part, and where normally live I could play the chords and the melody at the same time, and I could sort of flesh out that tune with just one guitar and bass and drums, and that's all it would be. But on the recording, I'll take that top note and I'll double it with an actual lead guitar part to make the melody stand out even more. And I'll even do something extra, is that I will add another set of voicings on top of it that have notes that the guitar voicings don't have. So, like, in other words, making it more into a piano thing, other notes of the chords, which of course I can't pull off live, but I don't care, because live I can flesh it out enough that the people will know what tune it is. It's not going to sound as full as it does on the record, but it's a trio. What do you want?
Yeah,
you know? But I like adding those extra voicings, you know, because it makes everything sound so much fuller and so much more harmonic. And it's a lot of fun to try different sounds, try millions of different pedals, go for different tones, and pretty much do the same thing that Steely Dan did on their record. Weather Report did on their records. Add a horn section, add backup vocalists, you know, add 3 or 4 different guitar parts, add this, add that, make it a big, huge thing, you know. It's sort of like making a movie. It's not theater anymore. It's a movie, right?
Yeah,
and
it's beautiful. Yeah,
enjoy it. I enjoy that part of music, and I enjoy producing. So at that point, I'm not as much a guitar player as I am a producer. Right now, I'm kind of rusty because I just finished the album, and I haven't been playing as much as I normally would be because I've been so busy mixing and doing all this layering and mastering. And, you know, I've had to spend time away from my guitar practicing like I normally would be. But now the album's done, I can go back to my practicing regimen, practice 8 hours a day for the next couple of months, and get my chops back.
What do you practice? I mean, what do you practice actually? What's your schedule?
I basically just practice what I'm going to be playing on the tour. You know, I practice the tunes from the tour. I don't want to practice giant steps anymore. I don't care anymore. I mean, it's like
you did it.
I went through the standards thing, and believe me, there's so many jazz players out there that play bebop 10 times better than I could in my wildest dreams. I don't want to compete with those guys, and I don't want to be those guys, you know, so I let them do that, and I do my thing, and my thing is about original music. And of course, some of my music does have chord changes, so I will have to practice playing over those changes and trying to come up with as much new vocabulary as I can, and just feeling comfortable. I think Pat Metheny said one time, it was a really interesting thing that he said, and I totally know where he's coming from. When you're practicing improvising, those two words don't even really go together.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Because practicing implies that you're practicing something that you're going to play again. You're going to play it once and you're going to play it again. Where true improvising is coming up with stuff you've never played before.
Exactly. Yeah.
So there is a certain part of my practice where I would practice, like, say, a vocabulary. You know, I know that in a particular chord progression, there might be a really cool voice leading idea that works really well going from one chord to another. So it's so good, I want the audience to hear it. So I'm going to play it at some point in my solo. But I don't want to just go up on stage and just play a bunch of licks and just play stuff I've played before. So what Pat was talking about was practicing without playing any licks at all, and just training your fingers to be able to go anywhere your imagination wants them to go. So to have your fingers have so much dexterity that no matter what you think of, you can make your fingers go to what you're thinking of. And that's another whole different kind of practice that is completely opposite from practicing licks or practicing preconceived ideas. So I find that that's a difficult kind of thing to achieve. And it's harder to achieve that because your brain tells you to do something, but many times your fingers just won't do it because they've never done it before. So the more you do that and the better you get at that, the happier of an improviser you're going to be. So a lot of my improvising and a lot of my practice time goes toward that goal.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah. Right. So little time, in a day. So it's like, that's why I'm asking you, like, what you do. So just to
I mean,
usefully,
when it comes to soloing, I do practice that a lot, but of course I've got to also practice the music itself and try to get the music under my hands so I don't screw it up, because I make a lot of mistakes. And so I have to practice the music a lot so that I can just sort of play it without thinking about it too much and just sort of do it. What do they call it? An automatic pilot.
Oh yeah, kind of. Yeah.
That's one of the things I love about touring, because when you're playing every night, often the music just gets under your hands and you don't have to think about it. It just becomes something that your hands do, and you can concentrate more on being creative than just have this thing in your mind. Don't fuck up. Don't fuck up. Don't fuck up. Don't fuck up.
Yeah.
And when you get past that point of just being so worried about making mistakes, and you know that you're probably going to play the music all right because you've played it so many times that it just comes natural, then you can start having fun and being creative. But it takes a few gigs to get, to get to that point.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. How have you, talking of leading your trio or your band, how do you see yourself evolving as a band leader from when you started until now? I mean,
I don't really see any musical change. What I see more of is an attitude change of being less anxious, being less nervous, being more at ease with being on stage, and thinking more about what we sound like as a band than worrying about what I'm playing. Probably in a nutshell, to be less self-conscious.
Yeah.
Because the more self-conscious you are, usually the worse you play.
True. Yeah.
When you're self-conscious, you judge yourself too much. So many players, when I hear them play, I can hear the hate they have for themselves, because they rarely play anything twice. They play something, and then I can hear that little voice in their head going, that just sucked. Try something else. And then they play something else and they go, yeah, that sucked too. Let's go to something else. And everything sounds so discombobulated and unconnected because they never make a commitment to anything to play. Because how can you make a commitment to something that you hate? So,
That's a heavy one. Yeah.
If you're not so self-conscious and judgmental of yourself, you find that it's easier to just accept what comes out of your instrument and try to make something happen with it, to play a motif and try to take that motif somewhere and build and get the other members of the band involved in what you're playing. Because if you're too self-conscious, usually that turns into a negative thing, because you're gonna have that devil sitting on your shoulder telling you that everything you play sucks. And as soon as you play it, so it's like you're your own judge, jury, and executioner.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that is really not a good attitude to have. And when I go see someone play who has a lot of confidence, you hear it. You can hear it. I believe people hear that aren't even musicians. They can hear it. It's a vibe, you know, it's a confident vibe that you can hear someone talk and hear self-confidence, or you can smell the fear. You know, people smell the fear when you go out on stage and you're afraid of everything you play. It's akin to like every time you touch the neck, it's like touching a hot oven. You know?
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh shit, did I just do that? Oh shit. Oh man, I shouldn't have done that.
Yeah,
Very,
true, man.
very,
Yeah, true, man.
very,
Yeah.
very self-judgmental and very, very self-critical.
Mm.
And that's not a good attitude to have on stage, because it leads to just a downward spiral of the whole night.
Yeah, true.
And I'm speaking from experience, from a person that's been there
Mm.
and trying to avoid that happening in the future.
That's good. I did the other day this talk with Gary Husband, and we talked about Alan Holdsworth, and he said Alan was like that. That after like the best gig he played, he was like, "Yeah, shit, I sucked, man. That was the worst." Like,
Well,
you know, it's like interesting.
There's a it's hard to talk about this because I get it, because I'm the same way.
Mm.
When I get off stage, there's nobody that doesn't think they couldn't do a better job after they did the job. I mean, there's no such thing. Michael Brecker used to come off stage and say, "I suck."
Yeah.
So if he feels that way, what hope do I have? So there's a difference between, you're two different people when you're on stage and when you're off stage. Off stage, I'm the most humble guy there is. I mean, I know my playing has a lot of faults, and I have so much in my playing I need to improve. But I'm not gonna think about that when I'm on stage. On stage, all I'm gonna think about is having fun and communicating with the band and having a good time, and not be so self-critical. If I'm gonna be self-critical, that's off stage.
Yeah.
You know, do different things. So when Alan comes off stage and says, "I suck," I don't blame him. I say the same thing. I come off stage and I'm going to go, "Fuck, I wish I had played better." I don't really know too many musicians who wouldn't say that.
Yeah, interesting.
Artists in general, because we always think we could have done better. And I think that's healthy, because that makes us grow.
Yeah.
So I'm not one of those people that would like say, "Oh, you should be a complete egomaniac and think you're the best thing in the world," because if you do, you probably won't get any better.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So there's a fine line between being a confident player on stage, but then off stage still realizing that you need to practice and continually improve. So I'm totally get where Alan was coming from, but I would have to say, if that hindered Alan from playing well on stage, which sometimes it did, then that's not good.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I saw Alan play quite a few times and didn't think he played very well, because I could tell he was nervous and that he wasn't having fun.
Mm-hmm.
So saw Alan play a couple times where I felt like he was really on, where he wasn't nervous, and where I felt like he was at ease.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I was like, yeah, he's having a great night. And I could tell the difference sometimes. And not just Alan, but I've seen Mike Landau on nights where he didn't have a good night, and you could tell he was nervous and he didn't play his best. And then I've seen gigs where he just slayed, and it was unbelievable, and it was great. And you could just feel how relaxed and in control he was.
Yeah.
And we all have those nights where we're nervous. And when we're nervous, we never play well. It happens to the best musicians.
Yeah.
So if there's anything that I've noticed an improvement in myself, and it doesn't always happen, because, none of us are perfect, but I've had way less nervous nights than I used to. I usually go up on stage and my attitude is just, let's have fun.
Mm-hmm.
Let's be self-critical. Let's listen. Let's try to have good dynamics. Let's be melodic. Let's, not be afraid to continue my ideas, and just basically be fearless. on stage.
Yeah.
And then when I get off stage, I can talk about how I suck.
Oh, that's good advice, man. Yeah, that's for every one of us. Yeah, true, true. But Scott, not to take too much of your time, I just wanted to ask you. I saw you have a quite a big tour planned. Also coming to Europe to promote the new album. And what are the plans for the upcoming months? I guess for you.
For me, I'm just practicing and trying to get back some of the facility that I had in my fingers, because making an album, wow, such a
I know, yeah.
it's such a I mean, of course, when you're playing the music, you're playing a lot and stuff, but so much of it is production for me. And mixing took 12 days.
Yeah.
Mastering, get the search for sounds. Oh my God. I could go into that for months.
Really? Oh wow, it's like Eric Johnson kind of.
Yeah, I mean,
like guitar sounds, you mean, or like in general, drums and bass and
yeah, just mostly guitar stuff, like coming up with a part and not being able to find the right tone for it, something that mixes, something that sits in the music well. You can tell. I mean, for you as a listener, you're probably listening to the music and just going, yeah, it all sounds good, it sounds nice, but you wouldn't believe how bad it could sound if I made other decisions, where a part it just isn't the right sound for the part. And so you try different amps, different guitars, different pedals to finally find the sound that makes it fit, that where it sits in the track nicely, where you can hear it, but you want it to call a certain amount of attention to itself. If you use one sound, it calls too much attention to itself. If you use another sound, it doesn't call enough attention to itself. So finding those sounds is hard, and it takes quite a bit of time to do it. And that's time away from the guitar. So that's where I envy jazz guitar players. They don't have to worry about this shit. They just pick up their guitar and they're playing 24/7, right? That's where I kind of wish, if I wasn't making records, I would probably be a better guitar player. But I like making records, and I like doing what I do. I like making movies and making this big, production. I like the composing side of it and the producing side. It's fun for me, and I enjoy it, but it does definitely take time away from the instrument. And that's when now I am just nothing but about the instrument. Try to have my guitar in my hands 24/7 and get back to where I was, because I feel like my chops just went to shit after all this work on the record. I need to get back where I was.
So nice to hear this from you, since you've been in doing this for such a long time. It's beautiful that you still have the love for the instrument.
Well, your chops are something you just got to keep up, especially when it comes to execution. That's one of the biggest factors in playing guitar, is execution without clams, right? Because how you pick a note and you don't quite pick the note at the same time your other finger hits the string, and it just goes and a note doesn't come out, and when the tempo gets faster, it becomes harder just to make those kind of connections, and just to have, that's what I say when I say chops. I don't really mean playing fast or because that probably, if that's the least thing I care about, is playing fast and having a bunch of chops, because of course there's about 3 billion guitar players out there that play 10 times faster than I do. But I'm not really concerned about that, but I'm concerned more about execution of ideas on the spot. Just to be able to think of something, executing it without a fatal error, where, just like obvious making a mistake. And you just have to be lubed up, and just sort of be one with your instrument, which requires you having your instrument in your hands all the time to feel like you know, are just one with it. You know, because I know when I pick up my guitar the first thing in the morning, I just feel like, God damn, I don't even know how to play. And then as the day goes on, after a few hours of practice, I see, okay, it's starting to come together. I'm able to play more confidently. I'm able to not make as many mistakes. And every day I notice it improves a little bit. So I figure if between now and the time I leave on tour around, you know, the middle of February, I'll be all right. But I'm going to have to do this at least 5 to 6 hours of practice a day.
Well,
get back to, you know, where I feel like I'm ready to go on the road.
Yeah. Fantastic, man. Are you going to release a new record on your own again? I mean,
yeah. I'm not really into labels.
How come you decided that path? I mean,
that was a decision that was helped by Mike Varney, who was with Shrapnel Records.
Yeah.
He wasn't just a label guy. He was actually a friend of mine. And he advised me when I made the Vibe Station record, he had already put about $7,000 or $8,000 into the record. And in the middle of recording, he was going to sell his whole catalog to Sony, which he actually did. And he said, Scott, you know, if I sell my catalog, your new record is going to be part of that catalog. It's going to come out on Sony. That would be my worst nightmare because they would never even return my phone calls, I'm sure. It's too big of a company.
Sure.
So he was the one that suggested, why don't you just pay for the rest of this record yourself and put it out yourself? Because companies like CD Baby and distributors have become a lot more accessible to artists.
Yeah.
You know, and you cut out the middleman. And so you basically have to do a little bit more work because you're paying for the musicians, you're paying for the studio, you're paying a publicist, you're paying an artist to do the cover, you're paying to have the CDs printed and made, and you're paying to mail the CDs to the distribution company. So you have to do some more work, but I got to tell you, in the end, it's so worth it.
More rewarding.
You're making so much more money because you're getting the money from the CDs, not some label. And it's been really worth it for me to do it this way. I wouldn't do it another way.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay.
Because it's you know, I like this new album cost me something like $23,500 to make.
Okay. Yeah,
it's a lot of money.
That's a lot,
you know, out of my own pocket. But I know that over the years, it'll pay off, and I'll be able to do another one. So I wouldn't go back to using labels again. You know, maybe for someone who's new and doesn't have a credit card where, you know, with that much credit on it, and you needed a label to pay for your music, then it would be worth it. You're not going to make much money on the back end, probably, but you're going to get your record out there, and that's important for a new artist. So for someone like me, it doesn't make sense to use a label, but for a brand new artist, it probably would make sense to use a label. So it depends on what your situation
is.
Yeah, where you are in your career, for sure.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Beautiful, man. Yeah. Scott, thanks for sharing some of these thoughts, man. I don't want to take too much
pleasure,
of your time.
Man. So, it's good to see you, and man, I hope we can come back soon.
Oh man, I love the hat, by the way.
Oh yeah, I'm kind of rooting for the Rams. You know, we won 3 games in a row. Tomorrow we're playing the Ravens.
San Francisco will, I think, win it. You'll see. You'll see.
I'm not going to have my hopes up too high, but we'll see.
Yeah, it's a good. I'm more into basketball. You know, I have like
that's
tons
cool.
of hoodies.
I like basketball too, but I'm more of a football. I've been a football fan forever.
Yeah.
And I like the Rams and the Dolphins. And the Dolphins are doing really good this year, better than they've done in many, many years. And I'm from Miami, so I got to root for them.
But cool, man.
Oh, fan.
Yeah. But cool, man. I hope to catch you live somewhere in Europe in spring. You
Yeah, I
know,
hope
if,
so. That'd be great, man. That'd
I'll
be
drop
great.
you a
Be
line.
great to hang out.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, please do. Keep in touch.
Keep in touch, and thanks again for sharing this stuff. I'll let you know when this is out and send you a link
My pleasure.
after.